topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
What's working on purpose anyway? Each week, we ponder the answer to this question. People ache for meaning and purpose at work, to contribute their talents passionately and know their lives really matter. They crave being part of an organization that inspires them and helps them grow into realizing their highest potential. Business can be such a force for good in the world, elevating humanity. In our program, we provide guidance and inspiration to help usher in this world we all want, working on purpose. Now, here's your host, Dr. Elise Cortez.
Welcome back to the Working on Purpose program. Thanks for tuning in again this week. Great to have you. This show has been brought to you with passion and pride since February of 2015. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. If you don't know me and we've not met before, I'm an organizational psychologist and logotherapist, speaker, and author. My team and I at Gusto Now help companies to enliven and fortify their operations by building a culture and leadership activated by meaning and purpose. Our mission is to help our clients create a destination workplace where people flock to join, are intrinsically motivated to perform at their best, can grow to their fuller potential, and are committed to stay and dynamically deliver on the company's mission, which all translate to higher profits. You can learn more about us and how we can work together at gusto-now.com or my personal site, elisecortez.com. With us today is Fabrice Desmarescaux, who works with CEOs and business owners and their teams across Southeast Asia and Europe to help them reach higher levels of performance and consciousness. A partner and practice leader at McKinsey & Company, he has practiced meditation, taught yoga, and led spiritual retreats for 2 decades. By integrating Eastern spiritual traditions with Western modern management and psychology, he raises his clients to new heights of clarity and productivity by focusing on what makes us fundamentally human: the desire to be happy, to connect with others, and to be true to our purpose. Over the years, he has worked closely with CEOs and business owners across Europe and Southeast Asia. He's the author of The Art of Retreats, A Leader's Journey Toward Clarity, Balance, and Purpose, which we're talking about today. He joins us today from Singapore, where he is 13 hours ahead. It's 5 o'clock Wednesday night for me, and it's 6 a.m. Thursday for him. I love how time works. Fabrice, welcome to Working on Purpose. Bienvenue.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning to you, Alice.
I want to celebrate this beautiful book that you brought into the world. Fabrice, as I told you before we got on air, I loved it. It's beautiful. I learned so much from you. And so will our listeners and viewers as we talk about it. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Let's start, if we will. I appreciate that you also wrote a good bit about you and your journey, which I think is really essential if you're going to write a book about retreats and transformation and such. We need to know something about you. So will you start by sharing just a little bit about your own journey, especially, as your own questions about who you are and what you wanted to do in terms of work and service began to maybe transform for you than when you first set out in your career?
Well, I was a business executive. I've been lucky to have the opportunity to work with senior leaders from a fairly young age. So all my career, pretty much, I've been an advisor to the top of the pyramid, as we could say, C-suite executives, CEOs, etc. I was a consultant, then a partner at McKinsey. I left to become a banking executive. I ran a pretty large business in the banking industry, and then changed careers and went into advising leaders, recruiting them, advising them on their careers, and finally went back to McKinsey to lead the leadership development practice in Asia. So since the circle is closed in a way, I started my career as a business advisor. I went back to finish as a CEO advisor on topics of leadership. So that's me, and that's the source of the book as well, to put my 35 years of experience in perspective and to say what, in addition to performance, which I think everyone takes for granted, the role of a CEO is to deliver performance. But when we do that, I think we look at the world through a very narrow lens of, I will deliver revenue, I will deliver profits, I will deliver shareholder value at any cost. And that has led to some of the issues that we're facing today in the world. And so I like to balance performance with a quest for purpose. Why are we doing this? Why is it good? Why should people care? How do we enable organizations to flourish? And how are we in service of the greater good as well? So it's not an either or, tree hugging on one side or, ruthless killer on the other side. We need to have both a drive for performance, because a business that doesn't perform that's not good for anyone. But at the same time, we need to have a sense of purpose and acting for the greater good. Mm-hmm. So that's my quest, in a way, is to rebalance the energies in the world and work with my CEO clients all over the region and in the Middle East and in Europe to bring this dual lens of performance and purpose in their lives and their organizations.
Well, we are very much aligned there, Fabrice, in terms of what we're out to do. And I want to also celebrate how important the work that you're doing is as well. Really, from my vantage point, right, leadership is really incredibly, hugely important. I think even more so as people expect more from their leaders, especially business leaders. And so it takes an even stronger, more capable, competent, balanced, in touch with himself or herself person to do that. And so I really appreciate that you really, in your book, talk about the importance of how leaders need to achieve greater clarity, balance, and purpose when they combine both acting and being, and especially taking time to, partake of a retreat to be able to do that, which of course is the focus of your job. And so I appreciate that you say, and the higher they go in any organization, the greater the rewards for marrying action and contemplation.
Yeah, which is a paradox, because the higher you go, typically the more, the busier you're going to be, and there's going to be distractions from all parts, right? So let's take a minute to reflect on the role of a CEO. And I'm talking CEOs the CEOs I work with tend to be at the head of very large organizations, right? So we're talking 10, 20, 30,000 employees, yeah, and market capitalizations of 10, $50 billion, right? So, but I think everything I say applies to much smaller businesses as well. It's just a question of scale, but the nature of the role remains the same. And first and foremost, the CEO has the ultimate responsibility for conducting the business and is the steward of the organization into the world. So it doesn't matter whether you have 3 employees or even if you're self-employed or you lead 50,000 employees, you have access to power, you have access to resources, and therefore you have a responsibility. And that responsibility, we have to see it as going beyond just delivering value for the shareholders. Okay, so the role of the CEO has a number of facets, but if you think of it, right, there's a business component. So how do we make money? How do we steer the organization into the future and navigate the changes in the environment, the markets, competitors, changing tastes of customers, technology, etc. So that already is highly cognitive, right? We need brains, we need strategy skills, we need visionary skills, etc. Then you lead an organization, so that's human beings. These annoying things that have their own needs and their own,
competing agendas. Yes.
And I think the problem starts when you have one employee, and then it adds on. Of course, when you have 10,000 employees, you have a human resources department, etc. But that doesn't make it any easier, because the human resources people themselves are people. So right, etc. And then you have the market. So you have your customers. In many industries now, there's regulators. There's competitors that you need to deal with, and you need to know them. You need to build relationship with your partners, your suppliers, your customers, etc. Mm-hmm. And then you have your shareholders, and broadly speaking, the investor community at large. Now, if you run a family business, you're the main shareholder, your family is the shareholder, or you and your friends, or you have a small capital table with a few venture capitalists. If you're a startup, for example, that's not too many people. But as the company gets larger and you go through IPO and you're publicly listed, then you need to deal with shareholders. So it's a complex job that requires many different skills and needs to activate the left brain and the right brain, right? A lot of CEOs are just trained to use the left brain. Right. So very analytical, very number driven, facts are facts, there's only one truth, and that truth is given by the immediate numbers that I have in front of me. That, in my view, hasn't always been like that, right? So it's a product of maybe the last 40 years. The greed is good. The product of the 80s, Jack Welch at GE, etc. Will do anything to deliver value at the expense of everyone else.
Right.
So my employees are a commodity. I can sacrifice them anytime I want. I can hire them. I can fire them. I'll curl the bottom 10%. What happens in the environment, frankly, is not my problem, right? So I can use the world's resources, do anything I want, exploit cheap labor in China or in Vietnam or etc. Not my problem.
Right.
If they use kids, 12-year-old kids, to work in my factories, not my problem, because you know what, it's a supplier, we cannot control all our supply, etc., etc. So I think we're all familiar with the excesses that being excessively left brain focused, analytical, I just look at the numbers. I think we're now starting to see 50 years later, the damage that this approach can bring. But this is a whole system, right? The whole system has moved in that direction. And today people take it for granted that if you want to be a good CEO, you have to deliver the value and at any cost. I don't think the discourse that we have on ESG or anything like that has really moved the needle, quite frankly. It's a lot of lip service, one nice page with a forest, picture of a forest in the annual report. I think today we're in a system that predominantly is left brain, analytical, focused on numbers, and doesn't take the whole picture in consideration. It's not a holistic approach. So I think what you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, Alice, but and what I'm working for is to say, let's reestablish a holistic view of leadership, which existed before, the family capitalism, people who, and I'm not saying it was flawless, but there was a lot of social responsibility in the early days of capitalism. And of course, if you go way before capitalism, then it was a different system. The issues were much less complex. Right. So I think I'm just reestablishing what it is to be human, in a way, to take a holistic view of what it means to thrive as a human being within our communities, and how do we bring this back to modern day capitalism.
Yeah. Well, here's what's great, Fabrice. I mean, I've been hosting this show for 9.5 years, and it's evolved tremendously over time. And I have quite an abundance of guests who are coming on, and the surround sound of creating, as you call it, more of a holistic approach to doing business and leading is deafening. I mean, I had an attorney on last night, a Black millennial attorney, talking about the importance of compassionate, conscientious leadership. I had an economist on who helped us understand the evolution of the last 240 years of capitalism. To your point, it started off much more socially aware and more focused on the value for the customer and lifting lives, and it later got more bureaucratized and financialized, et cetera. So yes, there's a lot of us working on this together. The Economist believes that about 15% of companies today are maybe heading more toward that holistic approach that you're talking about. Part of what I care about, and probably what you care about, is let's try to get that to 20 and 25 and 30%. Doing so will fundamentally change the world, and that's what I care about. So that's why I bring on guests like you to advance this conversation that I think is so critical, and keep teaching people, keep lifting people, keep inspiring people that there is a better way.
I'm fully convinced of what you say, and there's if you're familiar with philosopher Ken Wilber, and he's not the only one to say that. There's a tipping point.
Yes, right? Yes.
Once we reach, and he says 10-15% of the population that has elevated their consciousness to see the holistic picture, if you want, right? That tipping point then will drive the rest of the later adopters, and there's no going back. So I'm hopeful. And look, very to come back to me, and I'm just a small human being, working on this. But the fact that I have the possibility to do this work within McKinsey,
Yes.
In the past, we said, oh, McKinsey, okay, you guys are fantastic for strategy, probably, one of the best firms in the world for strategy, quality, excellence, etc. But you're very much focusing on the bottom line. That's why your clients hire you. And the fact that, me and a number of my colleagues, right, we're about, 200 consultants, partners, and some of our affiliate coaches to do this work within a system like McKinsey, I think is a very encouraging sign. And not to advertise for McKinsey here, but these are signs that I think the world is changing and the level of consciousness is changing.
I completely agree. And also the other, the big four consulting companies, also they all have a purpose department. All of them are doing this work as well. So I also find that encouraging. Yeah. So on that encouraging note, let us grab our first break. I am your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We are there with Fabrice Desmarescaux. Excuse me, I didn't say that right this time. Desmarescaux. Thank you. Very important to get a name right. Who works with CEOs and business owners and their teams across Southeast Asia and Europe to help them reach higher levels of performance and consciousness. We've been talking a bit about just where some of this leadership came from over the last several, say, 50 years or so, the need to incorporate left brain and right brain thinking and reach for higher consciousness. After the break, we're going to start talking about just the benefits of taking retreats and what that really means and how people can start to participate. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. Like Fabrice, I'm also dedicated to helping create a world where people realize their potential at work, are led by inspirational leaders, and they're part of organizations that do business that betters the world. So I keep researching and writing my own books. My last one came out in March of 2023. It's called The Great Revitalization, How Activating Meaning and Purpose Can Radically Enliven Your Business. And I wrote it to help business leaders understand the changed workforce land. What do they want and need from their work and from their leaders? And then I offer 22 best practices to help you fold that into your culture to create it. You can learn more at elisecortez.com or on Amazon. If you are just now joining us, my guest is Fabrice Desmarescaux. He's the author of The Art of Retreats, The Leader's Journey Toward Clarity, Balance, and Purpose, which we've been talking about today. So now we want to get into this idea of retreats. I think a lot of people, if they heard that word, Fabrice, would imagine it means something very, very different than maybe you initially intend. So first, a definition. Your definition.
Retreat is a parenthesis in your busy life.
Oh, I love that.
That's the simplest definition, right? It's not taking time off. It's not a vacation, because I don't know what most people do on their vacations, but there's associations of being with friends or family and playing and having fun and partying and going to restaurants, etc. So that's not it. A retreat, that there's 4 criteria, very simple, and I call them the 4 S's. So yes, the first S is solitude. So you're going to go on your own. Now, it doesn't mean you go in the middle of the desert and the nearest human being is 500 kilometers away. That's not what it means. You could be alone on your own in sitting in a coffee shop, for example, but you're alone, right? So that's point number 1. Point number 2, in silence. Again, you don't go into a soundproof chamber, but you disconnect the devices, and so that you can start hearing yourself think, and more importantly, you can start with a little bit of time and a little bit of quiet, you can start hearing the voice of your soul, right? Number 3, You need to be in a space that is conducive for the retreat. So you need to feel at ease. You need to feel the good vibes of the space. So for some people, it will be being in a park or a forest. For others, it could be sitting on the beach. For others, yet it could be a cozy room in your house. For other people, it could be their favorite coffee shop with their favorite cup of coffee, right? So you need to create the conditions. And I think we all know what that means, right? That there's spaces that resonate with us where we feel, sometimes you walk into a house or a hotel room and you feel, the vibes are good, right? My energy settles and I could spend time here. And sometimes you're in a place and you're like jittery and, this is not quite the environment. So that's my third criteria. Go into a space that is conducive for you to feel relaxed and where you can feel safe and open. And the last S is, be prepared to connect with your soul. So be open to whatever is going to come up, because we have, since young, we have shut that access to our inner source of wisdom, because the teachers and the professors and the business world has told us that there's only one truth, and that's the truth of the numbers.
Right.
And that's just not true. Right? We know for thousands of years that there's many different sources of wisdom, and if we just attune to them, right, we find our inner wisdom. So you find these traditions of retreat in the Hindu traditions. You read the Upanishads and you read the Bhagavad Gita, and you'll find that it's center and in central in the Buddhist tradition, of course, right, to take time in retreats, and the Thai forest tradition where you retire to the forest for the rain season for a couple of months, right? But it's also been central in Christian traditions as well. And there's always been people who took time and go on retreats, the Desert Fathers, and then later on, the Christian mystics, Meister Eckhart, and more recently, Thomas Merton, etc. So in every spiritual tradition, everywhere you look, right? It's true in Islam as well with the Sufi tradition. Everywhere you look, there's been this body of wisdom that says, you can be in the world and occasionally you retire from the world and you will reconnect with your inner source of wisdom, your soul. So solitude, silence, a conducive space, and the willingness to reconnect with your soul. Now, so it is work in a way, but it's not the work that you're going to do in a cubicle or in front of a computer or in the boardroom. It's work that you're going to do with yourself.
Right.
So that's why I call it the inner journey, because you will bring the awareness to what's happening inside, and you will discover new sources of insight, new sources of wisdom that you probably never knew you had. And the book is a guide. So obviously, if you've never done a retreat, don't start by, shaving your head and wearing a white robe.
Going away for 2 weeks.
No. Take 1 hour, take 2 hours. Let's go baby steps, disconnect the phone, take a notebook, and I absolutely discourage people from using tablets or their phone to take notes, because a lot of it are going to come. So take a proper pen and take a proper paper, and I always encourage my clients, buy yourself a nice notebook, because you will continue writing in it, and years later you'll come back and you'll see, oh, these are the patterns, years ago I already knew that, but now I cannot ignore it anymore. There's so much that comes up in these retreats. So I guide the reader in baby steps, how to do it, the logistics, how to convince your family or your office colleagues that, yes, it's important that I take 2 days and I be completely disconnected, and how to prepare for it. And then once you're in your retreat space, wherever that is, and however long you want to do it, 2 hours, half a day, 1 day, 2 days, maybe at the beginning. Don't go for too long, because, it's like go to the gym, right? I mean, don't go to the gym. If that's the first time, don't go for a 3-hour workout, because you're going to die, right? So go for a half-hour workout the first time, right? And start appreciating it. A retreat is a slow process of inner discovery. So let go of your attachment to outcomes. Maybe you're not going to have an illumination the first time. Maybe you're not going to be able to walk on water straight after your first retreat, but you're going to see the difference if you repeat the process. And so that's what it is.
That's beautiful. I also enjoy facilitating retreats, so I'm every word that you have said, I'm in a complete agreement. Okay, so for the people who haven't had a lot of exposure to retreats and maybe just aren't familiar, I think it would be very useful to offer a few of the things that you show in your book. I mean, 10 signs that you might need a retreat. What are some of those?
Well, the signs that you may need a retreat is, first of all, and I think that's one of the most important, is how distracted are you? How scattered are you?
Yeah.
So imagine that you need to work on a presentation. And, so it could be a presentation to your investors. You want to give them an update, or it's a presentation for a very important client that you would like to sign. So whatever it is, right? Can you block time and work and do, what Cal Newport calls deep work, right? Can you be uninterrupted for a longer period of time, 1 hour, 2 hours without interruptions? And most people, the truth is they can't. They can't because, first of all, there's plenty of notifications that keep coming on their devices that distract them. So they haven't had the discipline to turn off all the notifications. They're also uncomfortable to say, hey, 2 hours, maybe I need to check on my email every 15 minutes, just in case something important has happened. I mean, you wonder what could happen, but anyway, etc. So a lot of people are very uncomfortable blocking, say, 2 hours to do deep work. And so this is the first sign that you need a retreat, right? If you're constantly checking your phone, one tip I give to my clients is look at how many times you pick up your phone. There's an indicator on Android and iPhones that says, okay, how many times did you unlock the phone, or how many times did you pick up in a day, right? If it's above 100, you're in the red zone, my friend. Right? If you cannot live without checking your phone more than 100, less than 100 times a day, you're in the danger zone. So that's a sign, right? Sometimes we feel it. We feel that there's something, right? And look, quite frankly, it could be also the early signs of burnout, right? Because we're not very good at noticing what's happening, right? But you don't want to wait for a day where you cannot get out of bed, right? So pick up the signs that you need to rest, and rest doesn't necessarily mean go out with your friend and party all night. Rest means take time to regroup and be by yourself and start reconnecting with yourself, because we're in the corporate world, we're very disembodied, right? Essentially, it's like we bring this to work, right?
Right.
Rest doesn't matter. We ignore the body, right? So we bring our heads, and the body is simply a complicated device that can bring your head from one meeting room to another meeting room.
Well said.
And we've lost the ability to connect and notice the physical sensations, notice the feelings, notice the emotions, notice the level of energy in our body, right? So we're not attuned to the cycles in our body, the need to sprint sometimes and then recover, sprint and recover. We think, life is a marathon, but it's not.
Yeah.
You need recovery time. So, a few of the symptoms in the book, I list 10, it's a little bit of a funny way to get started, right? But it's like yes or no, you feel like you're, submitted to the conditions of your environment instead of being on top of it, for example, right? So it's a simple quiz to say, hey, if you get too many yes, maybe you should consider creating that parenthesis that I call retreat.
I think it was really important for us to bring this up, because a lot of people are probably like, I don't need that. I don't have time for that. But when we're confronted with that list, and you start to realize that you've just checked 5, 6, 7, 8 of those 10, maybe we should look into this. So thank you for sharing as beautifully as you did about just some of the signs that might indicate. Where I want to go next, and you started to open it earlier, but it's just so beautiful. I just want to take us into this space here, Fabrice. One of the things that I really love about doing retreat work myself too is the notion that, one of the S's, that of course the soul piece, the spirit piece to it. And so this idea, this need for contemplation, of course, with action, you say connecting with the soul cannot happen in a noisy world. Completely agree. And you need to let your life speak. And then of course you then reference Parker Palmer, who I also know of it as well. And what he wrote, which is so beautiful, we have to read it out loud. He wrote, "The soul is like a wild animal, tough, resilient, savvy, self-sufficient, and yet exceedingly shy. If we want to see a wild animal, the last thing we should do is to go crashing through the woods, shouting for the creature to come out. But if we are willing to walk quietly into the woods and sit silently for an hour or two at the base of a tree, the creature we are waiting for will emerge, and out of the corner of an eye, we will catch a glimpse of the precious wilderness we seek. That is so beautiful, so compelling. And what can happen? And what can happen in a retreat?
Well, I'm on the one hand, I want to say all the good things that happen on retreats because I want people to experiment and experience that for themselves. On the other hand, I don't want to promise anything because it's going to be different for everyone. And I also want your listeners to let go of this attachment to outcomes. I don't go on a retreat. Once I was speaking with a client and he says, Fabrice, I really want to learn to meditate because I want, to be able to be sharp and develop new insights. And I want to be like, I said, no, let go. Meditate for the sake of meditating. And I would say the same for retreats. Go on retreats for the sake of going on retreats. And let go of any expectations that you have.
Yes, totally agree.
Because then, first of all, whatever happens will happen for you and may not happen for someone else. The insights that you will get from a retreat will be your own. And so I cannot tell you what insights you're going to get. It could be insights about how you need to take care of yourself and realizing that, oh my God, for so long, I have not taken care of myself. I haven't listened to myself. Yeah. I'm doing this job, and I've been massively successful. Occasionally, there's senior executives who come to me for career counseling, right? And they say, Fabrice, I've been massively successful. I've made more money than I thought I would ever make in my life, but there's something missing.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that is. I say, well, let's find out. But you need to start listening to yourself to know what is missing, right? And it's not a realization that we're deficient in any way. I think, we're just beautiful souls, and we've done our best. We followed the education that for many of us, our parents had for us. There's elements of social conditioning. Where I live in Asia, it's great to be a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant or an engineer. So the parents tend to push their kids into these careers that may or may not be for them, right? So what you need time to discover that, and be a little bit kind with yourself, realize that you've done the best, but maybe now is the time to start realizing what is the next phase of your life that you really want to live, that is really connected with who you are. So it could be a number of things. It could simply be resting. I mean, some people go on a retreat and they sleep all the time because they're so sleep deprived. We have this macho thing that sleep is overrated and I can survive on 5 hours a night. And guys, this is going to be an all-nighter and we need to deliver this presentation tomorrow. Sure, whatever. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work like that. And I think we're
false,
now,
that's all. Yeah.
There's a new science of sleep, Matthew Walker and all these guys that tell you, you need your sleep. And if you don't get your sleep, you will pay for that. You will pay a very, very, very heavy price because in the short run, it diminishes your cognitive abilities. So being sleep deprived is like being drunk. You make the same bad decisions when you're sleep deprived as if you're drunk. Longer term, it will affect your neurocognitive faculties and you will have neurodegenerative diseases. So some people go on retreat and they sleep.
Yeah.
If that's the only benefit you get from a retreat, you can send me a thank you note.
I appreciate how you've situated it, that we don't want to set high expectations. Just come in and participate. Let's go ahead and grab our last break. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We're on the air with Fabrice Desmarescaux, who works with CEOs and business owners and their teams across Southeast Asia and Europe to help them reach higher levels of performance and consciousness. We've been talking a bit about why retreats are important, the components of them, how to recognize when you might actually need or benefit from one. After the break, we're going to talk about what Fabrice calls the Retreat Manifesto and how to even start designing a retreat for yourself. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. I mentioned in the last break that my latest book came out in March of 2023. It's called The Great Revitalization. What I did for you is I created a 3-page assessment that will help you understand the extent to which your current culture is meeting the needs of today's discerning culture. It's free. You can find it on my website at gusto-now.com. If you're just now joining me now, my guest is Fabrice Desmarescaux. He's the author of The Art of Retreats, A Leader's Journey Toward Clarity, Balance, and Purpose. So one of the things you talk about that I think is really interesting, there are many, many, many things I loved about your book and more that we could have talked about, but this idea of a retreat manifesto. Will you share some of the fundamental elements, the pillars of your retreat manifesto?
Well, the retreat manifesto is in a way, why would you want to go on retreat and how to do it? Right. So we talked about the 4 S's, right? So solitude, silence, space, and spirit. Mm-hmm. And then there's a number of topics that you can explore during a retreat. And in the book, I list 7 topics. Now, of course, the list could be much longer, but I think there's 7 topics that people can start exploring for themselves, right? And one that I find particularly important is actually the first theme that I mentioned in the book, which is this a journey or is this a destination? Mm. In the corporate world, everything is about the destination. Yeah, it's the sales target for the month. Right. It's the profit target for the year. It's the market cap target that you have in your stock options. Right. So there's always this notion that, we're going to work very hard to achieve the target, and then we will be happy. Now, the reality is, of course, absolutely not that. We will work very hard to achieve our target. We will achieve it or not. And then we will set another target. And so we're constantly in search of a target. We're constantly, in a way, unhappy by the current state of where we are. And we have this myth that we will be happy when, but the we will be happy when never arrives. And so corporations breed dissatisfaction, unhappiness, and a sense that I'm deficient because I haven't reached the target that has been set for me. And so I think reflecting on turning this around and to say, you know what, there's no destination. Yeah. It's just a journey. And given that this is a journey, how do you want to live that journey? Do you want to live that journey in a constant state of dissatisfaction and feeling insufficient and feeling that, today is not good, but tomorrow might be better once you achieve your target? Or do you say, look, I'm going to live every day and try to maximize every day and be joyful and find purpose and meaning in every day I work? And I will or will not achieve my targets. That doesn't change anything. You still have to work hard and you still have to be smart, but find meaning in every day you work. And so that is the first reflection. When I bring this to my clients, I tell you there's a light bulb going off because they say, yeah, absolutely, right? Why don't we find the beauty and the goodness and the truth in every day that we live? And how can we start creating this sense of joyful fulfillment that we can have in our organization? So that's one theme. Mm-hmm. Another theme that I like is to discuss, and that's very uncomfortable, and a lot of clients at the beginning find it difficult, is the realization that you are going to die. Yes. Right? We tend to forget that. We know it intellectually. We know, right? So if I tell you, Alice, are you aware that one day your life will be over? You say, of course, Fabrice, I know. But do we live our lives as if we really knew? Or do we live our lives as if this is, a hypothetical scenario that will happen one day, but I don't need to worry about that? And so, through very simple exercises, coloring, the squares and seeing how many squares you have left based on your life expectancy, realizing that you have a finite number of hours and days, and brings the realization that, oh, my time is precious. And so what am I going to do with my precious time?
Mm-hmm.
And how do I want to make it meaningful? Mm-hmm. So that's one of the meditations, and I draw heavily from various spiritual traditions. So I'm not advocating one spiritual tradition over another, but I draw from, of course, thousands of years of experience of human beings who have done these reflections and these retreats, and bring that into the book.
Yes, I thought your death chapter was really powerful, Fabrice. And, of course, in my work around purpose, what I really also discovered along my path is, a big reason that purpose is so powerful is because we are mortal. We don't know when the exit ramp is coming. So that gives us an urgency to live in the manner that we really value, and that in the way that we can make the best impact that we want. So it's critical, actually, that we die. It's just, so I thought your chapter was really, really powerful and poignant. And yes, people get a little squeamish when we talk about death, but it's so important. So some of the things that are interesting that I think will help our listeners and viewers understand what we mean by a retreat. Can you talk about some of the things that you like to see in retreats, how you would design them?
Well, I can tell that myself for just 1 minute, that I will just give an example, right? So I have 3 places where I like to do retreats, right? I have a small village in the Spanish central mountains.
Yes.
And there's really nothing fancy. Don't picture like Mac Mansion and no, it's very, very small, very humble village. I'm probably one of the few people who's not from Spain there, but the place is beautiful. So when I go there, in a way, I switch from the sophisticated life of the C-suite of Asia and Singapore, shiny glass buildings, etc., and I go to a very simple life. That is a very powerful reset.
Yes, absolutely.
I suspect that a lot of the people who listen to us will have a similar experience. Maybe we live in a big city, we work in an office tower, or etc. We have this fast pace, 24 hours a day kind of lifestyle, and then we have an opportunity to do a reset. I think that's very powerful, to reconnect with what is simple and true in life, and the connection with nature. I personally find very, very important. Right, nature brings down our level of agitation and busyness, and whether it's the mountain, the forest, the sea, the lake, whatever it is, reconnecting with nature and observing nature will really help bring you insights. So that's a place where I do retreats. I also have go to the south of France, and that's near the sea. So it's also I find the sea extremely calming. Being near a body of water also will bring your energy into a different space and will open up new insights. And then I do retreats at home. I also spend a lot of time on planes, traveling for my work, and I find planes, not short flights, but when I have a longer flight, I find it's a very, very good place to do a retreat.
Yes, me too.
Because you're not going to be interrupted. Right? If you don't have to connect to the plane Wi-Fi. So leave your phone aside and just be by yourself and start observing what's happening and maybe jotting down some notes in your journal. So that's how I do my retreats.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I also very much align with some of the things that the activities, obviously time for contemplation, meditation, journaling, you mentioned already. Time to reflect. We just don't tend to do that in today's hyper busy world, where we take a lot of pride in being busy, as you said, especially we Americans, as you said accurately. Creative activities. I love just to be able to add the creative function into retreats as well, taking time for walks, good meals. You talked about being very mindful of how you're eating, resting your utensil between bites. Just really, things that you can do that really radically alter your experience of the everyday. And some of the rituals that we might incorporate. So those are just some of the things that I thought we could sprinkle out to our listeners and viewers to get them thinking about what are they actually also doing when they've taken themselves away. So a beautiful list.
Yeah, and the book is a guide. So it's suggestions of what you can do. I think we have, every one of us, we have our inner wisdom. We know what we need if we just pay attention.
Yes.
And so, for example, what rituals will help you transition from the state of busy and work to the state of retreat and inner journey? So for me, I like, for example, lighting a candle. And just the act of lighting a candle signals to me that I'm transitioning from the space of, I've been checking my emails, I've been on the phone with colleagues or with clients, I've been serving my purpose in a way. There's nothing wrong with working, by the way. I don't want to tell people, quit your work and retire in the mountain and become a goat shepherd or something. No, keep your jobs, serve your purpose, but take time occasionally, right? So what is the gateway? What is the ritual that signals that you're transitioning from being in the world to being on retreat? And then once you're on retreat, I think creative activities are great because they activate the right side of the brain. They bring you into it. Could be reading poetry, singing, listening to music, writing with the stream of consciousness, write as if no one will ever read what you write. When we start journaling, we're very self-conscious. Oh, can I read? What if my kids find my journal? I will be so embarrassed. No, burn it after the retreat if you want. I don't care. Start letting your stream of consciousness flow. It's a habit. Once you get into the habit of tuning in, my God, this is so rich that you won't be able to do without it, right? Let go of that ideology of busyness, that I must be busy because if I take time for myself, I'm deficient. No, if you take time for yourself, you're actually doing a service to everyone else.
That's exactly right. Thank you for saying that. I was going to encourage you to say something like that. So it happens so fast, Fabrice. This show goes so quickly, especially when we're having such a rich conversation. Say in about 30 seconds, what would you like to leave our listeners with around the world who are looking for this kind of experience and to elevate who they're being in the world and their impact?
Well, number one, be kind to yourself. Number two, experiment. If you've never done retreats, if you're not used to connecting with yourself, baby steps. Take 1 hour. Don't do anything fancy. Just take 1 hour by yourself. Bring a notebook, a pen, disconnect the phones, no agenda, and see what happens. Tune in, listen to your thoughts, notice what's happening. Start small. That's what I would really like to live. And if you're used to doing longer retreats, and then by all means, give yourself permission, because you're doing yourself and you're doing the world a favor when you do that. You will come out of the retreats so enriched and so clear about your purpose that you're doing actually a service to the world.
That is a beautiful way to finish, Fabrice. I'm so grateful that you came into my path. I'm grateful for what you taught me in your book, that we get to share you with our listeners and viewers around the world, and they now too will be elevated by you. Thank you for coming on Working on Purpose.
Thank you, Alice. I really enjoyed it.
Listeners and viewers, you're going to want to learn more about this man. So I recommend that you check out his website. You can there find information about his book, The Art of Retreats. You can also learn about more of the work that he does, elevating consciousness and performance and facilitating retreats. His website, his personal website, is his last name, Desmarescaux, which is spelled Desmarescaux, Desmarescaux.com. Thanks for tuning in. See you next week for another nourishing and educational conversation on creating destination workplaces where people thrive, leaders inspire greatness, and business is done that betters the world. And remember, work is one of the best adventures and means of realizing our potential and making the impact we crave. So let's work on purpose.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's program. Be sure to tune into Working on Purpose, featuring your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, each week on W4CY. Together, we'll create a world where business operates conscientiously, leadership inspires impassioned performance, and employees are fulfilled in work that provides the meaning and purpose they crave. See you there. Let's work on purpose.